Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 4th, 2020. Round of the Puertes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we're sitting around here waiting on the deal maker in the White House to make a deal. You know, he let the stimulus package run out last week on American citizens.
Wow.
They lost that $600 a week in unemployment benefits. But not only that, Charlton, once the stimulus package ran out, it's going to hurt our frontline healthcare workers. I mean, that stimulus package benefited our first responders, Charlton, in a great way, keeping them employed, as well as our police department.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank the frontline workers, Charlton, nurses, doctors, first responders, the strongest group in America right now, Charlton. They've been dealing with this pandemic for over 6 months in a tireless, effortless way, Charlton, and they have never given up. They keep working hard for Americans every day.
They keep doing every day, Big C, and we'll do our part as well. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. Anywhere in the world. It's amazing when you say that. Also on Spotify, you can follow Big C Sports. I'll say hello to Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. It's all fair and love of war. Man, I love taking the pause, but I will never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, is even more important now, as we talked about when all the benefits ran out last week, Charlton, on the benefits program from the federal government. You know, there's a lot of talk about defunding the police. Well, we're also defunding health for veterans, Charlton, as that relief package ran out. And then we give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, but a lot of government services are going to be cut back, Charlton, and those veterans won't have access to many of the services that they need because the president refuses to act on funding the government and funding American citizens, which our veterans are a part of that. We lose some 22 veterans a day to suicide. And we see the callousness of our national government right now, Charlton, not caring about our veterans or our everyday citizens. As we think about people struggling, our veterans struggling, our everyday citizens struggling, Charlton, suicide rates and crime are going to go up because our police department are going to be defunded. Our frontline healthcare workers, our paramedics are going to be defunded. So as we think about those people helping veterans, Charlton, every day the president is saying it's not a necessity now.
Wow. I guess it's not a necessity if it doesn't affect you. I want to say we'll do our part. 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can hopefully get some help. Also, really happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. And they say, hey, kid, when you reach out to them, just tell them Big C Central. The goal is simple. Recruit 100 real estate brokers. Put their property listings on TV just like McDonald's do it. Dealerships doing it all over the country. Big C sports teams are back. They're doing it, at least while they're allowed to play. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to BigCSports.com. sports.pacwm.com. That's Big C sports.pacwm.com, and you can see opportunities there. You know, I was thinking, it's summertime, and it's a weird time of year. We know it's August, and people keep saying they want to get back to school, they want to get back to whatever. But I know sports teams are also doing their things. There's a lot of things happening in the sports world, and it seems like every day we hear something new, Big C. It's not like going to a game and everybody's going to expect to see the same people, the same players all the time, same coaches. It's all changing. If I look at what happened in the world of sports just recently, Big C, we know about all the COVID-19 challenges, but I look at the NFL football, Jacksonville Jaguars. They have a good old boy by the name of Gardner Minshew. Some good news. It's light at the end of the tunnel. He's actually off of the COVID-19 list, and he says he's ready to play. And I know no matter what the states are saying, whether the virus is a problem or not, we know that it is. But I'm a little bit more emboldened, more happy when I hear about people that go through that fire and they come out and they say they're ready to go. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, just because you recover from COVID-19 doesn't mean that you did not catch COVID-19 again. It doesn't build up immunity to the disease in your system. And you think about being in Jacksonville, Florida, the epic spot of the United States right now as far as the height of COVID-19 virus, Charlton. Gardner Minshew is one of dozens of players in the NFL that have been on the COVID-19 list. And so as you look at that situation, Charlton, this is a player who is coming in who may affect someone who is unaffected already, Charlton. So you don't know what the chance that he has of spreading this COVID-19 to somebody else because he has the particulars in his system. So these are the things that you have to pay respect to when you're looking at these players. Just because they've been cleared from COVID-19 exempt list by the league, it does not mean they can't pass the COVID-19 on to somebody else. And if you look at Gardner Minshew, he's going to have his hands in the butt of a guy most of the game as well as in the belly of a guy most of the game.
Hopefully not in the butt of a guy, maybe just between his crotch, Big C. A little bit of a difference if that makes any sense, but it's all fair. Minshew, he was talking about the fact that everybody's going through a little bit of something. In the NFL, they can test people all the time, and they can figure out if somebody has an issue going on with them. But if we look at the side of an athlete's mind, because they think they can run through water and not get wet, a lot of guys do. They think they can. It's musical chairs. There's 100 guys trying out for every position, even more. And most guys think that they're the one that's going to find that musical chair, Big C, no matter how much the odds are stacked against them. And when I think about the Jaguars, they have an NFL high 12 players placed on the reserve COVID-19 list. Minnesota and Detroit are second with 8 players on the list. There have been 87 players placed on the list across the league as of Monday morning. So that's just for backup players. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is throughout the league. You know, the league is going to disclose what they want to disclose as far as players being on this COVID-19 exempt list. I mean, it's an horrific thing to sit there and think that these players, Charlton, are going to be safe throughout the year. This shows the overzealous greediness of the league as a whole. Players don't get any extra money for playing in COVID-19. You're going to play for your salary. That's why I'm grateful for so many players opting out.
Yeah.
But what is the league going to do when you get players test positive throughout the game, Charlton, during the game? How do you test them during the game to find out whether they're positive? And then think about how many players that they may have come into contact with out on the playing surface.
Yeah, when I think about football, and of course we have Jacksonville, and they're kind of in the heart of the storm, if that makes sense. And we know everybody has, there's so much talk. It's a good and a bad thing. I mean, when this first came out, I think it was hit the news right around March 13th with when everything shut down. A lot of people didn't know what to do. No one knew because we still don't know, but we have a little bit more understanding at least than we did, at least from a medical science point of view. But I hope that some of these athletes that get right back into the saddle, like being thrown off a horse, they get right back on the saddle and they ride that horse without fear, Big C. I'm hoping that we can see at least some of that from our athletes, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't look at it as an athlete falling out of the saddle, getting back into the saddle, Charlton. When you get COVID-19, you get COVID-19. Yes, everybody does not react the same way to this disease, but it's killed a lot of people. You think as of today, we have 157,000 Americans that have died from this disease, Charlton. When you think about having a handle on this disease, we don't understand what's going on with this disease in America enough. We know if we practice social distancing and wear face masks, Charlton, it will control the disease at a greater rate.
Yeah.
When you think about the United States, we had 48,000 people test positive for COVID-19 today in America, Charlton. The people up north with Justin Trudeau in that place called Canada,
Yep.
they had 285.
Yeah.
Think about that. This is the reason why I don't want Americans coming to Canada. They have
Yeah.
285 people test positive for COVID-19 in Canada today. We had 48,000. So why does other countries around the world, and I believe it was Spain and Italy, Charlton, had 0 tests positive?
Yeah.
So how can other countries around the world understand this disease and we can't? The richest, most wealthiest country in the world that has to seem to have everything at our fingertips. But we have a buffoon as president who is walking around talking about we got this under great control and the numbers are all wrong. People are just going to have to live with it. We're testing lower than any other country in the world. We have 148,000 people that have died in America. But we have this under control. I don't know what he's thinking about. That's a little over a quarter of the people who have died in the world from COVID-19 have died in America. And the president said we have it under control.
Yeah, we know that the president's a kamikaze president. He wants people to go down with the ship. Big C, that's what he believes. Go down with the ship. Don't live with his lines. NFL players who decide to opt out of this coming season, they must do so by Thursday afternoon, according to some of the information out there. So everybody, I don't know what you're going to learn between today and Thursday that we did not know 30 days ago or even 60 days ago, Big C. I know people kind of run up to the edge of the cliff and then they say, no, I'm not going to jump. I'm just going to, not take that leap of faith or whatever it is. So if a player signed a 4-year contract with a $16 million signing bonus, the bonus normally would be applied against the cap at $4 million per year for those 4 years. But the $4 million for 2020 will not be applied for another year, even though the players has collected his full bonus, and that's where that $350,000 comes in, Big C. But it would make more sense if you play. You can get $350,000 if you opt out. But if you got to get through next year, you're picking up another $4 million. Why not just wait it out, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about that signing bonus, which is guaranteed money, that's your money. It's only going to apply to the cap when you're on the roster. And so these players who opt out and take the $350,000 in, and I know they set the deadline at Thursday for players opting out, but they've also put a new deadline in that, Charlton.
Yeah.
Where players, if they feel that they may be at high risk for COVID-19 at any point throughout the season, they can opt out. So if you have a teammate or two test positive, Charlton, you can opt out at that point in the season if you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or if you have family members who are at a high risk, if you have a family member that dies, you have a family member that's hospitalized, or any of those types of situations from COVID-19, Charlton, you can also opt out of the season. So the NFL has understood that the hard line that they originally put in of Thursday really doesn't work for everybody because they know that COVID-19 is going to come up throughout the season, Charlton, with his active players and even his practice roster players, coaches, staff members of organizations. So you cannot put in a hard line like the NFL did, working against the union that they have to work against.
Yeah, the NFL has a nice a nice union going on. I want to jump across to some Major League Baseball because you also think about players that are dealing with COVID-19 and then people saying it's okay. You have the St. Louis Cardinals. Yadier Molina, Big C, says he tested positive for COVID-19. He's a catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. And one of the players on that team who tested positive, a 9-time All-Star, he revealed his results today in a Spanish League Instagram post, Big C, So soon after that, the Cardinals issued a release naming 6 of the players who tested positive, Big C. 6, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, we had talked about this story yesterday. They've been in quarantine up in Milwaukee since Saturday, Charlton. They were not able to leave the city because of the COVID-19 breakout in the organization. They had a series that they were supposed to have been playing at home against the Cubs.
Yeah.
But this is just baseball. Baseball has told football what's going to happen with them.
Yeah.
Is that, you can sit there and play all the games in the media and the public that you want, saying that you have all the testing protocols. Testing protocols mean one thing, that you find out somebody is pregnant. It's like going to a store, Charlton, and buying a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And testing at home, saying, okay, I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
Same thing with these COVID-19 tests, Charlton. You can't do it at home, but you're going to a facility. You only know someone has COVID-19 after they've gotten it, not prior to. There's nothing you can do to protect somebody against COVID-19 if those particles are in the air, Charlton.
Yeah, they have you look at other teams that have already gone through that protocol. You have the Miami Marlins. They are cleared to play against the Baltimore Orioles after they have the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, if anything, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been talking to different doctors, too, and they say sometimes blood type and different things can go into it. We talk about pre-existing conditions. But when you have teams that are said, we're going to stop the season for you, and then they're cleared to play after an outbreak, Big C, that has to give everybody a little bit of hope, even though we might look at it with a little bit of an awkward look. But you look at the Miami Marlins, they were in the heart of the storm, too, down in Florida. And now they're being cleared to play. It doesn't mean that they won't have more issues pop up, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, in my line of sight, Charlton, I think it would give you apprehension. You're down in Florida. Florida right now is the epicenter of coronavirus in the United States. And yet you have the Miami Marlins down there, Charlton. You have the Tampa Rays down there in Florida. Not only that, you got a couple football teams down there in Jacksonville, Miami, and Tampa. So you're talking about the epicenter of the United States right now. If Florida was testing alone, Charlton, Florida would probably rank in the top 10 of the world's country right now with the number of tests that are coming up positive. So the thing about it is, like they say, once you got a cold, it's easy to get a cold again.
Yeah.
And so is it going to be the same thing with coronavirus? You had 19 people in that organization in Miami. And so how apprehensive are their opponents going to be when they have to go out there on the field against them? You got that catcher who is sitting right there 2.5 feet away from the batter. The umpire is leaning right over his shoulder, Charlton. And every time he slings that ball back to the pitcher, there's particles that come off his forearm. You know, you're going to have sweat coming off of there that may inflict on the player standing there in the batter's box. So, Charlton, I mean, I would be apprehensive about playing against the Marlins, even the Cardinals, or any other team that has come down with this COVID-19.
Yeah, we know they're not in a bubble. The Marlins, they had their season, if you call, put on pause. It was July 26th. They had 18 players and at least 21 overall, and the traveling party tested positive for COVID-19. So today's the 4th. That's approximately, 10 days, if that makes sense. Less than 10 days, I'm going to say. And so now they're saying, hey, everything's fine. I thought the quarantine time was 14 days. That's what I'm saying. Maybe they have access to information that the general public doesn't have, because every doctor, and when I even watch on television, even talking to my own doctor, they're saying if you test positive, then quarantine for 14 days. Well, they have they had 21 people on one franchise, the Miami Marlins. On the 26th, they shut everything down. And I know I don't have the best math in the world, but today it's only the 4th. So that means less than 10 days, they figured it out. Does it make sense, Big C, your thoughts?
No, they haven't figured it out, Charlton. They're trying to get these games in. That's what you have to understand.
Yeah.
Rob Manfred doesn't have a clue right now as far as how to handle this thing. His whole mindset is that he doesn't want it to come to an end. He's willing to put players out there at risk at all costs. The NBA has also done the same thing, Charlton. When you think about the NBA, at first they had a 48-hour quarantine.
Yeah.
Now it's down to 24 hours.
Oh, really?
So what these professional leagues are doing right now, they're pressing the envelope.
Yeah.
They're saying, well, okay, we're going to test you, but we're going to get you back out there. If you're not dead, you can play. That's what they're saying. But If it's only 24 hours and you tested positive, Charlton, and you're back on the playing field or court, how is that going to affect the players that you have to go against? And we know that they're passing droplets throughout these games.
Yeah.
You can't practice social distancing. So what the leagues have done, Charlton, right now on the professional level is like, hey, we're going to reduce the liability for us as far as losing revenue and have you out on the floor. If you've contacted and you tested positive, we're just hoping because we can do contract tracing, we know everybody that was on the floor with you, and we'll test all them immediately.
Yeah, it seems to be they're looking at a way to say we know we're willing to take risk with somebody else. It's always easier to take a risk with somebody else. Even in the world of college sports, Big C, it seems like college athletics, it seems like they're using COVID-19 as an excuse to abolish Title IX. That's for every woman in the universe that's playing college sports. If you notice, they're talking about abolishing the women's programs, yet whatever TV money they get in is to keep bolstering up the men's programs. They're not talking about abolishing football or basketball for college men. They want to push that over into the spring. But it seems like some of the women's sports that are supported through Title IX, they're not talking about pushing those into the spring. They're just saying cancel it and then hope that people forget about them. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think this is what our Republican Congress and President Charlton is allowing. Title IX, it was a law that was put on the book, and you're allowing these universities to walk away from Title IX, Charlton, that have supported so many athletic programs at these universities, and mainly women programs.
Mostly women,
throughout the past several decades. You're talking about discrimination that's being allowed. This is like fair housing. They wiped fair housing off the board. Now they're wiping Title IX off the board. In plain sight, Charlton. They didn't go into a dark room. They're doing it in plain sight to allow these universities. And I didn't realize that the universities had legal discretion to eliminate programs, Charlton, that were governmentally, put in place.
Yeah.
And so that's what has been done. And you think about some of the great programs that Title IX has provided for. You think about women's track and field. We all see women's baseball, but women's lacrosse, women's swimming, Charlton, women's golf, women's tennis. There are going to be so many sports that are wiped out from the greed of college athletics, Charlton. And this has been the pimping of the black athlete.
Yeah.
The black athlete right now on the college level, Charlton, has more power than they will ever have. I mean, 10 years from now, they will not possess the power that they have right now. That these universities are saying unequivocally, we're going to play football. We're going to put these black bodies out there and use them as test guinea pigs on the football field.
Yeah.
We're not going to pay them. We're not going to let them, have an opportunity to sue us. And these athletes will say, okay, we'll play. I want to honor my scholarship.
Yeah.
Right now, this is where you need to sit down at the table, and this is the reason why college football and athletics needs a commissioner. This is what the players are going to get percentage of the revenue. If you look at the money that they're talking about losing by not playing, look at what the athletes should get a percentage of by playing. These athletes should get at least 25% of the revenue that's generated by their university, Charlton.
Yeah, because even when you think of Title 19, next summer, I think in next summer, there's a player empowerment, Pac-12 Players Unite, as a college football leaders to work to rescue the football season worth billions of dollars. And when you say the word billions, just keep in mind that they make $0 if they can't get athletes to play for free. So if someone brings $1 billion because of TV and other sponsorship and sometimes the gate that shows up, it all goes over the hands of the people that make the money. Why is that so important? Because they're willing, the money's so important to them, Big C. They're telling guys you can play even if the state is shut down restaurants. You can't go into a restaurant because they don't want you to be exposed to COVID-19. But they're telling young college football players you can play football, run and smack into each other, but you can't go to a restaurant after the game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, and I've talked about this over several shows with you, Charlton, about the Negro athlete right now taking control of their destiny economically. I know that states have passed laws and stuff over in the next couple of years that players will be able to make money off their names and likeness and things like that, Charles. But right now, I would cut the curb on that if I was these athletes. And I know Pac-12 athletes are trying to get together with the commissioner of the Pac-12 to talk about this. And I would just say it unilaterally. There's a Power 5 conferences in America that everybody recognizes from these Power 5 conferences.
Yeah.
And in these Power 5 conferences, I'm going to say at least 70% of the football players are Negroes.
Yeah.
And they need to at some point get a coalition together and say, hey, we're not going to play. Yes, there's some great white athletes out there, Charlton, that can play football. But if these 70% say we're not going to play, and right now the NCAA is allowing players to transfer at whatever cost they want, transfer to the historical black colleges.
Yeah.
And make the revenue there. Say, okay, we're all going to transfer to historical black colleges, and we just want to cut of the revenue that we're going to generate coming to your university now with the best talent in America.
Yeah.
Let's see, don't these major white colleges, these Power 5 conferences, come to the table and say, we will give you what you want now.
Yeah, it's about leverage. And you got more leverage now than you're ever going to have. They're calling out coaches, and lawmakers are rallying for social causes and asking for answers about how they expect to play safe through a pandemic. You can't play in a house that's burning down and be safe. You just got to know you're going to get some burn. You're going to get burned, and maybe you're going to get recovered after they take it to the hospital. But right now, it's more about the money. Not one of these conferences, whether it's Pac-12, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, none of them are talking about an education and what potentially a college degree may do to help you learn something. It just means you're going to be more well-rounded when you spend more time in school, because not that many people are going to make it as a pro player. But again, we're going to put you out there even though it's not healthy, and we want to go out there and see you make some money. I want to ask this question. I want to pivot off of that question. And maybe we don't need someone to ask this question and answer the question, because there may not be an answer to it. It's a thought. Professional sports, even college sports. Is it time for white athletes to address the issues of how their black teammates feel and react to social injustice in America? You know what? One of the biggest injustices is these schools that are owned by white men. If they put you out there in a sick environment so they can make $1 billion and you get a steak dinner, they're going to take your scholarship away. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, always the biggest injustice in collegiate and professional sports has been the white athletes not standing up for the black athletes. They've understood the atrocities that black athletes have gone through ever since segregation, Charlton, desegregation. They've witnessed it firsthand. A lot of them have taken a hand in it. I remember a few years ago, Kyle Korver said he didn't understand why black athletes felt like it. When the Sebo Sechalowski got beat up by the police in New York, his teammate. And at that point right there, he had an awakening. His teammate was just standing on the sidewalk and was beat up by the police, broke his wrist, hurt his knee. He was out for the season. Settled a lawsuit with him. But he always felt like the majority of white people, well, they had to have done something.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just do this. Let me give you a perfect example, Charlton.
Yeah.
Yesterday in Aurora, Colorado, okay? 4 black teens and under were, the oldest was 17, the youngest was 4 years old.
Wow.
They were driving in their mom's minivan, okay? They were pulled over by the police. They were all taken out of the car at gunpoint, handcuffed, and laid on the ground. From 4 years old to 17 years old, Charlton, by the police. These were 4 young black girls, all white police officers. They said there was a suspicion of a stolen car. The car actually was a motorcycle that was stolen. But these 4 black girls, they didn't even give them due cause, Charlton. They pull them out. The car's registered to the girl's mother, but they got them laying in the parking lot at gunpoint with handcuffs on, face down in the asphalt. And I know in Colorado it's at least 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So when we think about how white athletes look at black athletes, saying, well, it's not our problem, it's your problem. You make enough money that you should be able to get around it. You got a scholarship. It shouldn't bother you anymore. But I know even when I was in college decades ago, Charlton, we dealt with racial divide even at that time, even within our roster and especially on campus. Racial divide was thick on campus at that time. And so for white athletes and black athletes, when black athletes always have to explain what white athletes are looking at, and these white athletes have conversations with other white people, so they know the atrocities that are being done to black athletes. And when they don't stand up and take the microphone, why do we always see on these sports shows black athletes or black activists explaining what's going on in society? Why do we feel left out and oppressed? And yet the whites are doing it. These whites need to come up and tell us why it's happening. Why does this keep occurring in America? They have to make us explain, make us understand as a culture why it still persists in 2020.
You know, we'll take the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout, but there was a player from the Indianapolis Colts up in Tahoe when they had the golf tournament, and he had mentioned that he went to a private school, and when kids got in trouble in private school, they didn't call the police. Oftentimes, they didn't even call the principal. They have what's called a counselor that would find out what's going on with that child. And too many times for black children, as we know, they're about 7 to 10 times more likely to be expelled for the same behavior by white school teachers. They're often put into the criminal justice system by calling the probation officer or law enforcement as opposed to getting a counselor. We'll take the Big C timeout. We'll be right back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on so many apps. And I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. I want to tap on to this subject you were talking about because I've always thought when women get in trouble and they're abused by men, we don't ask other women to stop the abuse. We ask the perpetrator to stop the abuse. Of course, women got to stand up for yourself too, but really we go after the perpetrator if it's a male and say, you got to stop hitting women. There's no excuse for that. Call the police on that man. And so the same thing holds true, and we had the whole Me Too movement behind it. So men set aside, and women were saying it happened to me too. Women stood up for themselves. And I think it made things change, at least on the surface level, even though this guy that says grab them by the PUSS, blah, 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 still got elected, and about 54% white women voted for him. I still will never, ever, ever understand that. So when black men deal with racism, and women too, well, just like women are asking men to tell men to stop the garbage, I've always wondered why has it gone so long that our white communities, they don't end racism, because it starts in the home. You don't come out of the womb being that way. You got to be taught that by a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, somebody. Why has it lasted so long, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, let me take you to an incident to expand on the last subject you were talking about school counselors. There was a situation in Florida last school year where a 6-year-old African-American girl were having a temper tantrum. You realize that the school called the police on her and had her arrested?
Wow.
She was taken out of the school in handcuffs. 6-year-old African-American girl. Can you understand the anger, the mental anguish that she's going to go through the rest of her life at 6 years of age because she had a temper tantrum in class? And I think maybe 80% of 6-year-olds have had a temper tantrum
of course.
in school at some point.
Yeah.
But she was cuffed up by a police officer, Charlton, and taken to jail. Not taken to the principal's office where she could calm down. Not taken to a counselor's office where she could calm down. But they called the police on her and had her handcuffed. But think about the callousness of this white police officer, Charlton, that came into the school and had the audacity to put the handcuffs on a 6-year-old child.
Wow.
And so when we think about the anger of the black community in America on all levels, think about that. When they say Black Lives Matter, that you put this 6-year-old child through that type of mental anguish and suffering that's going to bother her the rest of her life, that she'll have nightmares from and other problems, Charlton, and who knows where she'll end up socially. But at 6 years old, that you're cuffed up at school by a white police officer and you're taken in the back of a squad car to a police station.
Yeah.
So think about the effect that that's going to have on her the rest of her life mentally. Will she even want to call the police officers if she ever has a problem? And I'll go back to a case when we talked about the University of Michigan and the doctor that they had under Bo Schembechler, who died several years ago, Charlton, who was molesting male athletes, and they had some 57 lawsuits against the athletic department because of that.
Yeah.
There was a black tight end on that team, Charlton, in the early, mid-'80s, who was, examined by this doctor every time he had to go in for a physical. And it put so much fear of him, Charlton, in his body and his mind of going to doctors after he left the University of Michigan. He now has stage 4 colon cancer. And he was refusing to go to a doctor over the years, Charlton, because of how he was violated in college by a white man. And he did not want to go have another doctor thinking that he put that in this guy who was in his teens and 20s, Charlton, in his mind, that he forego medical examination because of the impression that had been put on him. So think about this little 6-year-old girl, how she's going to be.
I was listening to a woman talk on television. She's a Caucasian woman, and she was talking about she's a businesswoman. She's self-employed. So a lot of her medical information came from Planned Parenthood, that we know that POTUS is trying to abolish that too. Not everybody can afford just going out and seeing their own private medical doctor. And so women have gone through that same issue so many times. And when it happens, we usually ask the perpetrators to understand how to stop doing that. And the same thing happens with race. I want to throw one more story at you. It's Gary Patterson. He's a head football coach for TCU. It's called Texas Christian, like Jesus Christ. Texas Christian University, Big C. So he apologized to players in a team meeting on Monday after using a racial slur during practice over the weekend. The weekend, like August 2020, Big C, your thoughts?
And I'm still trying to understand, why is this acceptable for white men to apologize for using racial slurs against black athletes, Charlton? Why isn't it just automatically fired? Don't they have ethic clauses in their contracts? We saw what Van Gundy did at Oklahoma State. And, let me throw an apology out there. What they're doing today, Charlton, is what they did last year, the year before that, the year before that. It's their modus operandi. This is what they operate under. And they keep getting a pass.
Yeah.
You can do it. We're just going to just apologize. Just apologize. Think about every time that a Negro athlete has used a slur against somebody, Charlton. They want to put them on a stick and roast them over a fire.
Yeah.
But every time a white coach does it, Charlton, well, it's out of character. That's not me. I'm not like that. It's always said, I'm not like that. That wasn't me. They took it out of context. We hear that excuse made over and over. And that's why I said earlier, why don't white athletes start explaining to black athletes why they're being treated such ways?
I think the world, the world is full of competition, and if people think they're getting you, if they think you're weak, they're not going to stop. That's why bullies, they will never eradicate bullies from school. The only way you eradicate bullies is to be a bully back. They have this thing called social bullying where kids, and it's caused some kids to even take their own lives. Kids can social bully another student. Don't put a hand on them, but it's through social, the way they just go after them socially. And if the kids don't have a strong background, they succumb to that.
Said, Charlton, social bullying that has caused a lot of adolescent and teenage suicide in America. There was a little Negro kid 2 years ago in Chicago, Charlton, that was socially bullied. He was bullied at school. He was even beat up one day in the bathroom at school, and it was on camera. This little kid took his own life. He hung himself, Charlton, because he kept complaining about the bullying to the teachers, to the counselors, but no one would believe him, Charlton. He was 10 years old. He took his own life. So is this what you're suggesting, that because white athletes don't explain to black athletes why this occurred, they should start taking their lives? Or should they start arming themselves with pistols and AK-47s and go back after the white athletes? No, they shouldn't. There should be a dialogue why this is occurring. You can't just sit there and say somebody can always go back and start bullying. That an eye for an eye thing is not going to work in society, because they're going to arrest the black guy when it comes down to that.
Well, yeah.
But the black guys in black society did not create this. And so white society needs to explain to black society why does it still continue?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on something, too, because most people are bullied by their own peer group. And if you're African American, you're more apt to be bullied by another African American. If you're white American, you're more apt to be bullied by a white American. So putting the onus on white families to explain it is the same thing. Put the onus on black families.
I'm talking about athletes. I brought this in as athletes. I'm not talking about society. And I started out by saying, why do not white athletes explain to black athletes why this trend has always been in society of how they've been ostracized and treated so negatively? We're not talking about the broad brush of America. We're talking about the broad brush of the athletic field.
Yeah, but I disagree with that because I've known too many other black kids, including myself, when I was being bullied, I bullied back. But my intimidation came from black men. White guys were afraid of me. They didn't play like garbage with me, Big C. I had pretty good size. I wasn't the biggest guy, but I carried myself in a certain way. The guys that tried to bully me were black. I couldn't go to the white man and say, "Why is this black guy bullying me?"
You're going to a whole different
no, but
direction.
you're not listening.
The question that I've stated.
No, you can.
I said, why can't white athletes explain to black athletes why they've been treated so bad over the years, and still they do not understand the fight for social justice that black athletes stand for, and why haven't they always stood alongside them? That's been my question. I'm not talking about what happened in white society. That's going on every day. It's going on right now while we're having this conversation. But I'm asking about the white athlete.
And I'm asking you, because I don't know I'm not white. I don't know. But let me ask you this: you're a black man. What do we tell a young black? What do we tell a young black boy when he's being bullied at school by other black boys? Is it a white man's problem? No. We're going to blame white people for that? No. At some point in time, Dr. King was more bright than all of us. Quit judging people by the color of their skin and look at the content of their character, because the guys that tried to intimidate me, even in college, they were black, Big C. They looked just like me. But I stood up to myself, and that's the only reason no one harmed me. I never got harmed because I stood up to myself. It didn't matter what color somebody was. So I never want to act like black men are such cowards that we're going to go around crying because a white guy called us the N-word. Most guys, you smack them back. When you punch a guy in the mouth a couple of times, he'll stop saying that word. And
so what you're saying is that the athletes at TCU had the ability to punch Gary Patterson in the mouth and get away with that with autonomy. The same at Oklahoma State. They had the opportunity to punch Mike Gundy in the mouth, get away with that in impunity. Just like at Iowa. They had the opportunity to punch the strength and conditioning coach in the mouth and get away with it. Just like in West Virginia, they had the opportunity to punch the defensive coordinator in the mouth and get away with it. No, they don't, Charlton. And that's what I'm saying is you have to take those who are in authority, who have the dominance, to ask them why, and why can't they explain that? It's easy to say in a street fight that this occurred. We're not talking about a street fight. We're talking about a cultural stepping stone fight, Charlton. The reason why certain people stay oppressed all the time, you can't take what happens in black society and say, well, white society, they didn't do it. It was black on black. We know black on black exists. We know white on white exists. We know Asian on Asian, Hispanic on Hispanic exists. But when the greater oppression in America comes, Charlton, it comes from the dominant society. We're only 13% of the population. So we cannot create the majority of the problems in the population. We only get what we have to create problems, Charlton, from the majority of the population. When you think about the crimes they're creating, there's no black gun manufacturers in America. So they're not supplying the guns. They're not supplying the bullets. They're getting it from somewhere. When you look at unemployment in America right now, African Americans are 18% unemployed. White Americans 11% unemployed. There's a huge disparity when it comes to that. 18% of your population is unemployed, so that's in the millions in both sides. But it's a greater majority of African Americans unemployed, Charlton, at that rate. If white society was 18% unemployed and only 11% of African Americans, you would see a huge outrage in America.
Well, you asked me the question about Gary Patterson. If someone's intimidating you, go to the ombudsman, file a complaint. That's what you just.
But you just stated earlier, punch the guy in the mouth.
No, but you didn't listen.
You made that statement.
You don't listen. You're not listening.
How do you think Gary Patterson made the apology because the players went above him, and all he got was just apologize to him. They'll be okay. Just like Mike Gundy, just apologize to him. They'll be okay. Because we're not getting rid of you, the white head coach. But if you apologize to that black athlete and the rest of them, it'll be okay.
Well, Big C, you got to have thick skin, or you're going to run around crying every day because somebody was mean to
But
you.
it's not crying. We're asking for parity in this country.
That's what the court system's for, Big C.
The racial divide.
Okay.
The racial divide, just to have thick skin. Alligators got thick skin, Charlton. You see them on people's feet all the time. Elephants got thick skin. You see them on people's feet all the time. Cows got thick skin. You see them on people's feet all the time. Thick skin is not going to be, it's not the answer, Charlton. It's the mental aggravation that somebody goes through. That 6-year-old girl in Florida 2 years ago, you think she had thick skin being handcuffed and taken to the police station in the back of a squad car? You're going to tell her, just have thick skin. You're 6 years old. By the time you're 26, you'll be to forgot all about it.
I'm saying if you're going to raise your family to cry every time somebody calls them a bad name, especially if they're white, that's a shame. We have a law to go after people who violate your rights. If you're with a coach or an employer that's calling you out of your name and in threatening you, just like the Me Too women, those women, they cried, yeah, they complained, yeah, but ultimately they went to court and they filed a lawsuit. They didn't cry and say, please stop hurting us. They went to sue them in court, and that's what smart people do. Cry all you want. They ain't going to change nothing. You got to learn to sue people, Big C.
But think about this. These head coaches at universities are state employees.
So what, Big C?
They have a conduct policy in their contract.
Let me ask you a question.
Conduct policy in their contract.
Let me ask you a question.
And they're not forced to work under the conduct policy of their contract.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been bullied by a coaching staff in college, yes or no?
Have I ever been bullied? I stood up to him in college.
Okay.
We had a coach, Charlton, a defensive line coach when I was in college. And when he was mad at a player, he would take a chin strap that he had. At that time, they would have had the metal buckle. And he would slap it on players' helmets all the time. And that thing would ring inside the head. And one day I made a mistake, and he came to me, and I said, if you do it, I'm hitting you back. I'm telling you straight up. This scholarship don't mean as much to me. We had an offensive line coach that we had a center miss the block because our starting center had tore up his knee the game before. So this backup center was in a block in practice, missed the block. This offensive line coach jumped on him, Charlton. He had both legs around his waist. He's holding his face mask with one hand, punching him upside the head with the other. And if people are sitting there looking at it, would he have done that to me and got away with it? No, we'd have just fought right there, and one of us was going to lose a scholarship, the other was going to lose a job. But it's what players would stand for. Coaches know who they can pump and who they can't pump. And they know weak guys all the time.
And that's my point. That's my point. If you're going to be weak, you're going to get bullied all your life. You got to have thick skin. I just don't know. I was never taught to run around and put my head between my tails. But if that's what people do and you don't want to go to court, then you're going to be bullied. That's just a fact, Big C. But I want to, before I close on something, I never made it about race because most of the guys that tried to, white guys were always afraid of me. It was the black guys that were not afraid of me. They couldn't care less about racism. It's about, are you going to be a punk or not? And so I stood up for myself. That's why I made it out okay. And that's what I tell everybody. If you're afraid, then go to the law enforcement and file a lawsuit. That's my own opinion. Don't sit at home crying. My only thought is that's my opinion. I want to get on to the NFL because this is something that I think is important. But maybe it's not that important. NFL news, LA Chargers, Joey Bosa, he's averaging 11.5 sacks per year. 11.5 sacks per year. He has 40 sacks in 51 games. He's the highest defensive player, the highest paid defensive player in the NFL. Now, last year, Big C, when you look at some of the stat leaders, and now again, it's up to you, your agent, and if you can get the money by whatever means necessary, go get the money. We know that's possible. People are going to get the money. But the NFL leading sack leader last year had a lot more than 11 sacks. How did he jump the ladder and get that amount of money when he's not even, he's in the top 11 when it comes to sacks? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's what he's done over the last 2 years. He's averaged a sack. In his last 20 games, he's had 20 sacks as an NFL player. He's playing in a division that's loaded with quarterback talent, especially Mr. Mahomes in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And when you look at the impact that he has had on that Chargers defense when he's been in the lineup, you can't always judge a defensive lineman by the number of sacks that he has. A lot of players get sacks in bunches, and they'll go 4 or 5 games without getting a sack. If you look at what Aaron Donald does impact-wise on the defensive line for the Los Angeles Rams, It's not about the sacks he gets. It's about the disruption that he creates that's more than the sacks. This is the same type of player that Bosa is with the Chargers.
Yeah.
And not only that, they have a safety named Derwin James. And next year, Charlton, he'll be in the 4th year of his rookie contract.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to get a big payday, just like Jamal Adams wanted one in New York before he got traded to Seattle.
Yeah.
So when you look at these players, you got to put them under contract. And I don't care what contract you look at with a player. When they sign a 5-year deal in the NFL, it's actually a 3-year deal. You're either going to get it restructured or you're going to get released.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. So we look at the 5 years. The only thing that matters is the guaranteed money that comes into play, what you get on that signing bonus that day when you ink your name to the contract. If it says $65 million, you know that $65 million is going to be guaranteed, but it's also prorated over time. So it's just the going cost of the NFL. This is what it costs to do business in the NFL. We look at 10%, 12% of the players on the rosters in the NFL are making the money. You're saying 15 to 17 players are making the money. Everybody else is playing down there at minimum wage, which is not a poor payday.
Yeah.
So Bosa's been one of the elite defensive ends since he's been in the NFL. First, when he held out when he was drafted.
Yeah.
And so the Chargers didn't want to go through that situation again. They feel that they have a team in place that can compete next year. Not this season coming up, but next year. And so they want to make sure that he's in camp and playing with everybody else.
Yeah, I know it's about how they look at things, and everybody's going to get the money that they're able to get. Shaquille Barrett had 19.5 sacks, and then he's not the top player. But again, it's about your agent.
He's under the franchise tag. If you look at Shaquille Barrett with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he had 19 sacks. He had 12 of those sacks in the first 6 games.
Yeah.
So look at the drought that he went through to get to those games. He had 4 games I know of that he didn't have a sack at all. So it's misleading. Total numbers are not always accurate to the impact that a player has.
Yeah,
because on defense, you can take a player out of the game. Look at Khalil Mack. Look at the impact he had the first year he came over from the Raiders with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Look at where he was last year. But he's still the 3rd highest paid defensive lineman in pro football.
Yeah, but when you still look at Barrett, he had 8 more sacks than Bosa. And it's not just sacks. Some people are double team more. I still say if you can get the money, get the money. There's nothing wrong with that. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they still saw some life left in the veteran running back, Big C, LaShawn McCoy. They signed him to a 1-year deal to see if he could help out Tom Brady. Your thoughts?
Well, they got to see if he got anything left in the tank. He played 7 games last year with the Kansas City Chiefs. He got 1 carry in the playoffs, Charlton. He was inactive for the Super Bowl. So, there's a history of him, being productive in the NFL. He came in with Philadelphia. He went to Buffalo, went to Kansas City. Now he's on his 4th stop in Tampa.
Yeah. Now he's doing his thing. 32 years old. He can still lift his legs. He can still lift his legs at 32 years old, Big C. And in his 12th season, he started 141 of 160 career games, rushed for 11,071 yards, 73 touchdowns. Also in the passing attack, 500 receptions, 3,797 yards, and 16 touchdowns. So he's been doing his thing. He still has enough left in the gas tank, in my opinion, to get some things done. Pittsburgh Steelers, Big Ben Roethlisberger, he says he's ready after having surgery on a mysterious arm elbow injury. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he had 3 tendons repaired in his elbow, Charlton. He's been shown throwing the ball. He looked very accurate in delivering the ball. He's had almost a full year to recover from this injury. I mean, it's a lot like Tommy John surgery that baseball pitchers go through. You need time. You need the proper strength and conditioning coach to work with you, Charlton, to get that motion back in that elbow. But, Ben was the big reason why they did not make the playoffs last year. It was quarterbacked by committee, Mason Rudolph, the other guy, Duck, and I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
These guys just could not get it done under NFL pressure.
Yeah.
But they're a totally different team with Ben under center, Charlton. They're the 2nd best team in that division behind Baltimore.
Yeah, they're always solid, Big C. If the NFL looks at their prodigal sons, Big C, they want to look at Detroit, Matthew Stafford. And the Lions, he tested false positive for COVID-19, and so he's back into the saddle of things. He had a false positive test. I don't know how you have a false positive, but it's not like it's 100% accurate, Big C. But that's good news for Detroit. Your thoughts?
Well, it's good and bad news for Detroit. I mean, Matthew Stafford has the best statistics of a quarterback who doesn't win in NFL history.
Yeah.
So he's proven that he can throw the ball. He just hasn't proven that he can win.
Yeah, hasn't proven that he can win. NFL football on the East Coast, Carolina Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, he's feeling pretty good about his chances to lead the team. And for the Carolina Panthers, it's pretty big shoes to fill. Cam Newton took him to the Super Bowl, also was a league MVP. Teddy Bridgewater was undefeated when he was under the helm in New Orleans. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Teddy Bridgewater, Charlton, has been around the NFL for a long, long time. The last time that he was a starter with an NFL team with the Minnesota Vikings, he took them to a playoff.
Yeah.
Except, that's the year that Seattle won their first Super Bowl, Charlton, on a missed field goal by the Minnesota kicker at home in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
But then, he was signed by the Jets after he tore up his knee, spent a year there, and he went to New Orleans. And he learned a great deal behind Drew Brees, Charlton. You learn how to retool yourself. You learn how to restudy the game. And so he took leaps and bounds as a quarterback, as the backup quarterback in New Orleans. He was undefeated once Drew Brees got hurt. And it catapulted him into a big 3-year contract with the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
The greatest thing about Teddy Bridgewater, he's not under any pressure, Charlton. They have a new head coach in Matt Rule there in Carolina, so this system is going to be all new for everybody. So everybody's going to have at least that 1 year of the learning curve before the pressure's on them.
Yeah, it really is, Big C. I want to also ask you, before we come up on the close in about 5 minutes or so, Washington Red Tails, when I think about NFL football, you think about Washington Red Tails. Touchdown, Red Tails! The history is a possible solid name for a DC NFL team, the Red Tails. Sounds a little bit odd, mainly because we're so accustomed to hearing the previous team's name. But the Red Tails, really, when you think about it, it's one of the most popular names among the many under consideration. I mean, Tuskegee Institute, obviously, if they're going to, Washington was built by black men, Tuskegee Institute, the Red Tails, all this pilot talk that many people still don't know about the history and success of the Red Tail Pilot Squadron. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, there were 972 Red Tail pilots in the program in Tuskegee. 375 of them went and fought overseas during World War II, during the war, Charlton. And you only have to go to the Museum of Natural American History, African American History in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
to see one of the training planes that they flew in, Charlton, to prepare themselves for battle in World War II.
Yeah.
But when we think about the historical significance of the Red Tails and the historical significance of Washington, D.C., a city that was built by slaves, African Americans at that time, Charlton, not only that, 85% of the population of D.C. is African American.
Yeah.
I think it would be very fitting. And when you think about the attendance in that stadium, Charlton, the fan base, it's majority African American. So I think to play that historical significance in honoring the African American culture in that city and with that team, Charlton, would be the best move of all.
Yeah, considering their former owner, their past owner, he said he was happy that he was the last one to integrate the Redskins with the African American players. Big C. When you think about just negative behavior, but people overcome anyway. That's why I always say. I even tell my own boy, if you can do anything when you're confronted with bullies, you gotta either walk away or you gotta stand up for yourself. Smart people walk away. That's how you get to be an old man. And if you just like we tell women, you don't have to try to beat that big strong man off you by yourself, yell fire, whatever it is. But when you call the police and they show up and they're ready to take care of business, that's called even the playing field. Don't sit around crying when somebody bothers you. Fight them back. Navy SEAL, they cut ties with the museum. Listen, Mike Ditka, over an anti-Colin Kaepernick video, and they had some type of dog attacking us, I guess someone who had a Kaepernick jersey on in the video. But the Navy SEAL is telling anybody, if you did not fight for this country, quit telling people to get the hell out. You get the hell out, Mike Ditka. You didn't fight. You ran. You ran away like a little coward when you had a chance. And if you're not a coward, you can still join the military today. Big C, a Navy SEAL, are they going to tell him get the hell out of the country? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the opportunity to fight for this country has always been led through volunteers. And that door is never closed for people to volunteer to fight for the U.S., even today, Charlton. But many people say, that's not my call.
Right.
I will, criticize other people who don't.
Yeah, they'll criticize. They call the Sphincter Tightens Up, Big C. The Sphincter Tightens Up. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. One more story of Big C on this beautiful, happy Tuesday. If you want something, people, you got to fight for it. You just got to. You either fight or you cry. You got to choose. Fetal position or stand up and get law enforcement on your side if you have to. WNBA basketball, the women are scoring at a high pace. They're scoring about 100 points for most of the teams, Big C. I just say defense is not a premium with COVID, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you're trying to create interest in the sport, Charlton, and you're not going to have interest if you're going out there and you got games scored in the 50 or 60. So you're going to be a little light on defense, just like it was an NBA All-Star game, Charlton, where nobody plays defense, they watch. But I think it's good for the sport that they show that they have the offensive capability, the athleticism to produce great and exciting games.
Hey, it's worked for the men, it's working for the women too. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Burdini Brown. He was also known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I'm looking for caution moving forward in all sports, collegiate and professional. Pay attention to the science. Stop jeopardizing the health of these young men, black and white, in any race out there playing sports, Charlton. And once again, I want to say thank you to the frontline healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, first responders. They have the toughest battle every day in America, fighting this COVID-19, keeping America safe. Stay strong and save yourself. God bless from Big C.
It's all fair in love and war. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.